Hey there YouTube, I'm Ikitsu, this is the Ikitsu Times. Welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Sins of Solar Empire 2. So today we're talking about the Radiance battleship for the Advent faction, and this is actually my favorite out of all of the battleships. It's very versatile, it's capable of doing quite a lot that's both supportive and damaging, and its weapons complement is not only really strong, but it scales extremely well. The Tech Cole has the ability to scale its damage really, really high because its weapons are really, really good, but its base damage is quite low. The Cordial Devastator has got the best base weapons out of the three of them, but it doesn't have very good items to increase its damage with, whereas the Radiance has both good damage as well as really high potential damage because it can increase its damage by a lot there. So there's a lot of different ways to use this thing, and I think that's one of the nice things about it is how versatile it is. But anyway, let's take a look at the ship here. So it's got a durability of 500, it's got 4,400 shield points, it's got 1,325 armor points, and 4,150 hull points. Out of the three, it's a little bit fragile, but it's still pretty tough compared to pretty much all of the other Advent ships out there. It's got 240 antimatter, and it has a hidden armor statistic of 90 and a maximum speed of 700. For its armaments, it's looking at one strike craft squadron, and it's got two heavy beams at 12.5 damage per second with 500 pierce for a total of 25 damage per second. It's got one heavy plasma at 10 damage per second for 750 pierce, and two medium plasmas for a total of 10 damage per second, 5 damage per second each with 600 pierce. So these are all your main line weapons there, and we'll just sort of like look at this over here. We got the beams over here, I believe. The plasmas, I believe, are these ones. And then the small plasmas are these little things down here. All of them are very good at firing at a single forward target. So all of your high pierce damage is focused forward, unlike the Cortal. This is actually what makes this thing more dangerous in a duel than the Cortal with base damage there. However, it's lesser weapons. You've got 5 little laser cannons over here, and then this weird little knob that looks like a laser cannon when you're not paying attention, but it is not. And then you've got 2 additional laser cannons on the back end here. So you're looking at 10 of those firing forward at 3 damage per second each, 14 light lasers for 42 damage per second total, 30 damage firing forward with 100 pierce. So this thing is capable of concentrating its fire from its main guns extremely, extremely well. All of that frontal firepower is going straight at whatever it is you want to be hitting with this thing, and that makes this thing very, very dangerous and very, very capable, especially because none of those are missiles, so none of this is blockable damage. Very powerful ship and very good at its job. This is one of the reasons why I don't think they can easily nerf the Destra Crusader. If you look at the Radiance, it's actually possible to get like a Radiance, and it does a little bit less damage per second against enemy capital ships than the Destra Crusaders for the same amount of supply. So 50 supply worth of Destras does about 55 point something damage. This guy does 45. The problem is the Radiance also scales better because it'll gain levels, but also you could just throw a single weapon modifier on here and it's going to be doing way more damage than those 3 Destra Crusaders. So the Radiance being locked in at its values is sort of what stops the Destra from getting nerfed, which I kind of appreciate because it's nice to have a functional cruiser for the Advent fleet there. They share a similar role, though. They're weapons that have a lot of pierce that are capable of taking out enemy capital ships. You've got some weapons that are good into Titans. You've got some weapons that are good into command ships. But realistically, you've only got full damage into capital ships there. And then your light lasers sort of can do whatever it is they want to do there. The spread of those is also such that you can actually fight against corvettes pretty effectively with this thing. Those little light lasers are pretty quick to add up. But that's really not what you want to have as your primary role for the Radiance. It just gives you that flexibility to fire into them. So for our abilities here, we're looking at Detonate Antimatter as the first one. There's actually a lot of math that goes into this one. You've got a cooldown of 20 seconds. This actually increases as you level it up to a total of 40 seconds at maximum level. It's got 9,000 range, 60 antimatter cost. Those are static. They stay the same. The duration is 5 seconds, increasing up to 15 at the maximum level. Notably, each level up, you do actually have a higher proportion of uptime. So leveling this does actually improve it in terms of what it does. Antimatter removed is 10 per second. This stays the same no matter what. Damage per antimatter removed is 100. This goes up to 300 at maximum. And this is a sort of percentage. We'll sort of get into how that works in a little bit here. This also has 500 pierce. Now, this doesn't include the fact that this actually prevents casting. So you're capable of making it so that they are not able to use their abilities while they're under the effects of this. And this gets up to, again, 15 seconds. This can be a pretty long time before the enemy can cast again. And if you've got multiple chains of Detonate antimatter against something that's really used to being able to cast, like, say, you're using this up against something like an Antrak Marauder, then they're going to really be suffering. They're not going to be able to do anywhere near as much good stuff as they would normally be able to do. So how does the actual damage for this work? Well, Detonate Antimatter is actually a very big damage spike. It's not as much damage per second as the Cole's beam. However, it is more damage per second when it's cast than the Cole's beam. The end result of this is that this can actually do a bit better job dueling into a Cole than you would expect. So the way that this sort of works for scaling is that its duration increases, and every time its duration increases, that means you remove more antimatter. So just as base, you're removing 50 at level 1 there. Then you do damage equal to the amount of antimatter that you remove from the enemy, equal to a percentage of however much antimatter you remove. So the base value here, you're at level 1, you have it last for 5 seconds, you remove 50 antimatter, you do 100% of that into damage, so you do 50 damage. Not very much, doesn't seem very good, but this also has very, very good psi power scaling. Basically, you take your psi power, you multiply that by 5, and that's your new sort of percentage that you add to it. This means that if you got to level 3, you're getting that 300% base, and you're probably looking at 200 psi power for a pretty easy sort of value that you can reach. It's very realistic and very easy for you to get that. This increases it to an additional plus 1,000%. So you're getting 1,300%. So that's 13 damage for every antimatter that you remove, or 130 damage per second total. For the 10 antimatter. 130 by the 15 seconds that you got, you're doing quite a lot of damage from one Detonate antimatter. So as long as you're focusing at least a little bit onto Detonate antimatter and a little bit onto your psi power, this thing is a very, very good capital ship killer, and it's also something that can pretty easily chunk down a caster cruiser, or even just kill it outright if it's a lighter one. So Detonate antimatter is definitely one of those abilities that you can throw on there that's going to make a big difference in fights against big, tough capital ships. I think it's actually stronger than the Cole's Beam. I certainly think it's better than anything that the Cordial Devastator can throw out. It's just a really, really powerful ability that you can get really good damage out of. By the way, 200 is a relatively low number as far as what I usually go for if I'm going for a caster build. If you wanted to make a caster Radiance, you definitely can, in which case you can get to around 300 or even 400 psi power. And a 400 psi power Radiance is getting like 2,000%, so 2,300% total, which is enough that you're capable of doing kind of ridiculous damage to an opponent there. But realistically speaking, I think that we can just say lock in at 200 as a really easy number that you're going to get there. A 200 is basically just you've got the baseline text and you've got the harmony circuit, and that's it. And that's all you really need for this thing to function properly, but you can definitely go higher. You can add in an extra 100 from having the Psionic Dynamo. You can have the extra 100 from casting Avatar on the thing, and then you can have an extra like 30 from Culture, and then another 50 from being Advent, or having the planetary defense item. So you can get really, really high numbers there, and end up in a situation where like a single Detonate antimatter can strip away like multiple thousands of hit points from just a single cast there. It can get really, really scary. You're probably not going to do that. That's a lot of effort. You can only avatar one of these guys. It's better to avatar one of your Oblivias if you're playing as Advent Rats, so you're probably not going to do that, but it is a possibility if you've gotten one of these out there and it's your big ship before you've hit that point where you've got the Oblivia, then absolutely you can do that. Have the Detonate antimatter hurt for a ton of damage. Combine that with the Cleansing Brilliance on a 500 psi power Radiance, and you're looking at a situation where you're probably just going to like one-shot a capital ship, basically. Anyhow, our next ability is Animosity. For some reason, I always think this is named Malice, but it's not. Has a cooldown of 75 seconds, a range of 6,500, antimatter cost of 90. Those all stay exactly the same no matter how much you level it. And it deals, and basically it increases your damage against everything in the circle here. Those are your targets. Those targets take an additional 10% damage from the Radiance itself, not from everything. And it reduces the damage the Radiance takes from those targets by an additional 10% as well. Both of these scale with psi power and levels, so this goes up to 10, 20, 30% base, and then minus 10, minus 20, minus 30% damage mitigation as you level it as well. The ratio on the psi power is basically 1/10 of your psi power gets added to the percentage. So if you're looking at that sort of very easy 200 that I was mentioning, you're reducing it, you're changing it by an additional 20% there. So plus 20%, minus 20%, you're ending up in a situation where you're at 50% for both of those, making it really, really strong. Duration is 30 seconds. And that, again, stays constant throughout the levels for Animosity. So Animosity's primary thing, though, is not mentioned in those stats there. The primary thing about Animosity is that any ships that are not capitals or anything bigger than that are forced to attack the Radiance. And this is extremely, extremely powerful. For 30 seconds, your Radiance is going to be taking all of the firepower from whatever enemy ships that you've cast this on, frigates, cruisers, corvettes. They're all going to be chipping away at the Radiance. And since it's a fairly tough ship and you can make it fairly tanky, this is not a bad thing. But this is one of those situations where you want to actually combine the Radiance with more of itself. If you have 3 Radiances, what you can do is you can have one cast Animosity, and it'll take a bunch of damage. And then you have the second one cast Animosity, and it'll take a bunch of damage. And then you have the third one cast Animosity, and by the time you cycle back to the first one, you're probably going to have had a shield burst, so its shields are back up, and you've only taken a little bit of armor point damage, maybe none even. And now you're back up in shields, and you just keep cycling back and forth and back and forth. And this means that your enemy's entire fleet is dealing like 50% less damage than they normally would do. So not only are they dealing like less damage overall, but they're always throwing it onto a target that has refreshed shields. So you can actually basically make it so that if an opponent is relying heavily on a bunch of sub-capitals, you can just not take any damage with just Radiances, making it so it's very, very hard for them to damage you. What's even more dangerous about this, though, is that those enemy frigates and corvettes and cruisers can't leave. They have to fight the Radiance. And this means that if you're cycling through this and you're focus firing down enemy capital ships and stuff like that, after the capital ships are either dead or they've retreated, and your opponent really wants to leave with their fleet, try to preserve whatever they can, you just keep cycling Animosity, and their fleet literally never gets to leave. You just get to destroy their entire fleet for free without them being able to actually do anything about it. So they have to commit at that point in time. I think that Animosity is actually stronger than Gravity Warhead for destroying an enemy fleet, even though Gravity Warhead lets you pick off capitals. But Animosity, like if you can destroy enough fleet value of regular non-capital ships, your opponent's forced to build only capitals or something like that, try and counter that kind of play. Or they have to make sure they're going in a situation where they can actually beat you decisively. Not really easy if you've got a bunch of leveled Radiances. Next ability here is Energy Absorptive Armor. This basically gives you additional weapon reload psi power for each stack that you get. Up to a maximum of 15 stacks, goes up to 30 and then 45 stacks at maximum. Basically, every time you get shot, you gain a stack of this, going up to 15%, 45% at maximum level. So this basically makes it so that you have a faster fire rate and you have more psi power, which is pretty strong there. The duration is a little bit weird. Basically, as long as you're taking a little bit of damage, you're going to keep getting stacks. It's actually really easy to stack Energy Absorptive Armor up to maximum, so I wouldn't worry too much about trying to maximize that. You don't need Animosity to usually get that. You'll just take weird chip damage from random guns firing at you, but Animosity definitely does help you charge that faster, and they synergize quite well together. But basically, this is the one that people sort of ignore because the numbers look pretty bad, but the psi power is really good for this ship. The weapon reload is, of course, really, really strong for this. It's overall an okay ability there. I don't mind it. But generally speaking, you're going to like pair it off with Animosity if you're going for an anti-light ship sort of build there, and you're not planning on using Detonate antimatter very much because you want to preserve your antimatter. This is a very expensive combination if you go for both of them. And you might want to go with Detonate antimatter and Energy Absorptive Armor as the combo as well, just again so you can save your antimatter a little bit. If you are using Animosity and Detonate antimatter, especially at lower level Detonate antimatter, you actually really, really need Acolytes. If you don't have Acolytes sort of boosting up the antimatter that the Radiance has, it runs out very, very quickly. So having that extra bit of ability power from just having like this without having to spend antimatter does make it so that you can cast indefinitely without having those Acolytes. Your last ability here is Cleansing Brilliance. This is one of the few fairly easy to access area of effect abilities that Advent has access to. Has a cooldown of 2 minutes, a range of 8,000, antimatter cost of 150, which is very expensive. Has a duration of 8 seconds and a radius of 2,000, which is actually quite large. So the primary target that you've actually targeted with this takes 200 damage plus 1 for 1 for your psi power. So if you've got 200 psi power, it's 400 damage per second with 500 pierce. This is very good for sniping at capital ships there. If you can get it up to, say, like 300, you could easily get that. That would be 500 damage per second. And then you'd be doing 4,000 damage with a single cleansing brilliance. That would be pretty good. If you're getting, of course, a little bit less, then you're getting a little bit less there. Targets in radius, that is everybody that is not the main target, takes an additional 100 damage plus half of your psi power. So if you're getting, again, that 200 psi power, it's just 200 damage per second with 100 pierce. This secondary damage is actually still pretty good. You're looking at 1,600 damage from that sort of build there. That would be enough to cause some substantial damage to a significant number of like frigates or something like that. It would be pretty minimal damage against any capital ships in the area, but it's still some damage, and it would be a little bit of damage against any cruisers that are sort of in that radius there, but definitely would be able to clear out a fairly large number of corvettes or frigates that are stuck in that area for that time. You can also make it so that, like, of course, you've got Animosity cast on the ones that you're trying to get so that they're less likely to be able to get out of that radius there. But it's an 8-second one. It's a pretty short one with a low channel time. You'd be able to typically get the full damage off against a target there most of the time with this anyway. So yeah, the Radiance here, it's got excellent abilities either for dealing with fleet. It's excellent for protecting the rest of your fleet. It's good as a sort of support tool. It does really good damage against light ships. It does really good damage against heavy capitals. It can deal AoE damage. It's got like excellent ramping. It's sort of the whole sort of deal there as far as that goes. And just for like people wondering, like the energy absorptive armor at maximum stacks is giving that minus 45% to reload speed. That's about as good as the Cole's like weapon reload ability for itself there. So it's really strong there. So yeah, I definitely would not underestimate that. And that's on a passive. That's one that you're not even forced to cast anything there. So let's go ahead and look at our hostility research. You're of course going to want like everything that gives you like the psi power. That's an important part of all Advent capitals. But the things that I would find most notable for items for this one would be things like the Psychonetic plating, the Harmony circuit. I would think that the Vex amplifier is very important there. And I would also look at things like the synchronous shield potentially, and of course the energy accelerator. This is also one where you can get away with the plasma concentration or plasma agitator. That's definitely something that can kind of work for this guy. But generally speaking, like you definitely want those base psi power bonuses there. For energy, I think these guys are uniquely benefited by the shield burst. Again, that sort of is because of that ability to pass around their taunt. If you've got multiples of these guys, or even just one of them that can help it so that if they're focusing down your frigates, you can make it so that they're all suddenly focusing on your Radiance, and that gives your frigates time to sort of get their health back. So I think that this is a ship that really, really benefits from having a lot of these restorations. The actual shield bonuses themselves are okay for the ship. The synchronous shields are okay for the ship. You do want the antimatter bonuses because the ship does use those. As far as weapons go, beams are probably going to be the most commonly important one. But the plasma is a close secondary, and if you're up against the tougher, heavier ships, like the command ships or a Titan, then you kind of want to rely on the plasma more than you want to rely on your beams. And the lasers are all secondary weapons. You don't need them as badly. There's some weird stuff that can happen from diffusion moderation with this particular ship. I don't think you necessarily benefit too much from having it, but it can make this ship fire from extremely long distances. You just have to be careful to micro it because it will make it so that your beams outrange your plasmas. And if that happens, you could end up in a situation where you have to sort of inch forward a little bit so that your plasma engages, which is the majority of your anti-capital damage anyway. So definitely want to make sure that's firing there. As far as substance tree goes, you're just going to get the like stuff that's in here, but it's not really high priority as far as the ship goes. You do have a little bit more priority on armor than normal because the ship actually has got decent armor values, but you still don't have enough to make these your primary sort of thing there. For Harmony Research, you've got the Protection and Unity for Advent Reborn, which is going to make it so that you're capable of recharging your shields. Again, if you're passing around damage from the enemy, this is a really powerful ability. Making it so that you restore your shields during combat is going to be quite nice in this instance there. For Advent Wrath, of course, you've got the additional 30 psi power in the culture tree, which is going to make it so that these things can do that extra damage with their abilities. Very, very good, but the Fury of the Unity is the really strong one, making it so that they've got the additional 20% attack at the super late game, making them extremely, extremely deadly. The attack damage is particularly good with something like a Radiance, because they're capable of getting like the energy accelerator, which gives them the flat values, and that plus 20% is also really strong. So it synergizes well with the attack speed boosts from the energized armor, giving them that 45% additional attack speed. So that combination just really works well with this type of ship. They're giving them insane attack bonus damage, multiplies with the other abilities there. Now, as far as Unity goes, this is a ship that can benefit a lot from Cleanse. While you're passing ships around and making it so that you're using Animosity between multiples of these guys, Cleanse can help make it so that you don't lose any armor points with these guys. And since your smaller ships are probably not taking any damage to begin with, Cleanse can really make a difference in terms of just keeping your Radiances alive if you're taking more damage than you would really like to be. Recall, not really anything special as far as these guys are concerned. Sacrifice, not really anything special as these guys are concerned. But Resurrection, you're not playing a mothership if you got a bunch of these guys necessarily, or you might not have as much of a chance of getting a level 6 one. So Resurrection becomes a little bit more important for a fleet that is relying heavily on Radiances, just because you'll still be losing other ships. Being able to bring them back is always nice and helps you keep up in terms of your fleet size. So if your numbers are dropping, you don't have the ability to get a mothership up to level 6 because you've got a bunch of level 6 Radiances or whatever, that is definitely an option there. Now, I think that these guys get along really well with Advent Wrath, however. The Avatar ability gives them a ton of extra damage, as well as the bonuses to their abilities. If you're casting on one of them, late game, you're probably casting it on the Oblivia, but casting that so that the Radiances are getting that 30% extra damage, again, having a higher base damage really helps if you've got some sort of attack speed bonus, because they multiply with each other. So this guy really appreciates that sort of thing there. As far as the other abilities, Chastise doesn't really do much for these guys in particular, but you can get the AoE effect there, and that actually can push Cleansing Brilliance over the edge and actually destroying a bunch of frigates there, because a lot of stuff just sort of survives the Cleansing Brilliance at most values that you'd be using it at. Being able to deal just a little bit more AoE damage can push it over the edge and make it so that a Cleansing Brilliance can actually just kill whatever it is you're pointing at. And of course, you know, if you're using like multiple Cleansing Brilliances, you're probably going to be doing a tremendous amount of damage to whatever you're focusing on, maybe even killing it. But one of the things that you're probably lacking is anti-cruiser damage from this, because that 100 Pierce, like, it won't really kill hard, because even if you're stacking 3 of those on it, the Fury might actually push it over the edge to the point where you can actually kill them. It really just depends on a lot of contextual stuff, but it would certainly help soften up those cruisers to the point where you'd have a higher chance of actually killing them with a bunch of Cleansing Brilliances. So, can work there. I think that AoE stacked with AoE is always a really strong thing whenever you can get away with it. Now, as far as builds go, the Radiance is a ship that I think you could really experiment with. I think that if you've got some sort of idea in mind, you can definitely go for it. But let's talk about Detonate Antimatter as a build. So for this one, we still actually want to get a little bit of Animosity just as a thing to have available. There's going to be moments where even if you've only got a small number of Radiances, being able to pop Animosity so that you can use that taunt to save or preserve the rest of your fleet is going to be like huge. So having access to that is always important, even if you're primarily going Detonate Antimatter. Whereas if you're going for an Animosity build, you may not need Detonate Antimatter at all. But if you're going for this, you go for Detonate Antimatter 1, and then you go for Animosity, and then you go for Detonate Antimatter again. That's going to be your level 3, which of course is what you can sort of start off with these guys. Very, very powerful combination at this point in time, but you're missing out a little bit. At level 4, you would go for the Energy Absorptive Armor, then Detonate Antimatter to maximum, and then Cleansing Brilliance. And then after that, you'd go 2 more Energy Absorptive Armor. Remember, Animosity doesn't scale on its cooldown, its antimatter cost, or its duration. So all of the important parts of it, as far as like having a taunt goes, remain steady. What levels and scales is the damage dealt, the damage mitigation. So you don't really need those if you're not using this primarily for those effects. So I would keep this at 1 until the last couple of levels there. This does mean that this sort of build does rely a little bit more on levels than some of the other stuff, but that's pretty typical for castery type builds. If we're going for this sort of route, of course, what we're going to have is the Harmony circuit. In this case, we're going to get the Psionic Dynamo. Having access to Animosity is really useful as well because it'll help scale our Psionic Dynamo faster, even though it's got a fairly long cooldown. You're going to be able to use your Harmony circuit, your Detonate, Antimatter, Animosity, and then Cleansing Brilliance to get up to 4 stacks like really, really fast. Admittedly, you could also just hold off on the Cleansing Brilliance, but with only 2-minute cooldown, that would actually be kind of okay. In this case, after those two, I would probably go for Psychonact Plating. And then I would probably get the Vex Amplifier, just really hammer home the fact that we got all that additional psi power to really scale with those two things there. If I wasn't really going to worry about my attack damage here, I would probably go for the Synchronous Shield as well as the Psychonact Plating. That just makes this thing is capable of like doing its shield burst thing really, really effectively. Especially important for this one because it's like taking a bunch of damage. It's not mitigating anywhere near as much as a more dedicated Animosity build. For the next one, I would go for like Animosity and then Energy Absorptive Armor, then Animosity again. This build is like more dedicated towards taunting. In this case, you would go for another Energy Absorptive Armor, then Animosity, then Cleansing Brilliance, and then you would just get like Detonate Antimatter after you capped everything else out. What this build can do is it can basically just go up to the enemy fleet, just take 0 damage from it, like the actual basic guys, and still be able to do a quite decent amount of damage thanks to that Energy Absorptive Armor. This one is one where you want to be fairly tanky, but there's a couple different ways that you can sort of go about this build here. One, you get the Harmony circuit that increases your tankiness because it increases Animosity. You're not really going to be getting Psionic Dynamo here, in my opinion, but if you really wanted to do that build, you could go for like Animosity, but you spread out between Energy Absorptive Armor and Detonate Antimatter just so that you're casting. And level 1 Detonate Antimatter has that advantage of giving you faster casting. So you'd be able to get the Psionic Dynamo actually charged up a lot faster by having just level 1 Detonate Antimatter. Still, I wouldn't really recommend wasting all of your antimatter on that. You would have to have a lot of acolytes, and this build should be one where you're not using that. So you get those taunts down. In this particular case, you go for the Synchronous Shield, you go for Psychonact Plating, you go for the Harmony Circuit, those 3 things. And then after that, you can kind of go from a different set of things here. You could go for either the Energy Accelerator or the Vex Amplifier. You could even go for the Plasma Agitator if you really wanted to. That has some benefits. If you're up against like really, really tough ships, like you're going against those command ships or you're going against like Titans, this is technically a little bit better than the Energy Accelerator because the Energy Accelerator is boosting weapons that you don't need boosted. But this thing can add a lot of damage against capital ships because it gives you that 45% bonus damage to your beams, which are going to be getting boosted by Energy Absorptive Armor, so you get that extra attack speed as well. You probably aren't going to be getting the most out of Vex Amplifier in this particular build, and I wouldn't really recommend it for it. And this is also one where you could go full tank. What you could do is you could go for the Harmony Circuit, you could go for Psychonact Plating, Synchronous Shield, Structural Force Fields. At that point in time, your ship is capable of withstanding just absolutely ludicrous amounts of damage, and basically bring itself completely back to life on a bit of a whim there. So this would be the version that's just designed to get shot at by like 1,000,000 Calebs or something like that, and come out of it relatively unscathed. You would have to definitely have 3 of these guys for that type of build, in my opinion, but you'd still be you'd still be pretty functional even if you just had the one of them. But you definitely get some more benefit later on into the game there. The last build is a little bit obtuse, but you could go actually for Energy Absorptive Armor as your primary ability. You would want the one of Animosity. You would probably want a little bit of Detonate Antimatter, so I would actually go even on those 2. And in this case, we're getting the Psionic Dynamo, the Harmony Circuit, the Vex Amplifier, and the Energy Accelerator. And we really have to make sure that we've got the ability to protect the ship and keep it alive, because we're not taking the Psychonact Blade and we're not taking any of the defensive abilities. The reason that we're taking all this is we want to actually just clip a couple enemy ships with the Animosity, and when we clip just a few ships with that, we can actually cause this thing to stack up its Energy Absorptive Armor. This is a build that I would only use for Advent Reborn, where the Justitia is capable of keeping this thing like alive and giving you even extra damage mitigation. But if you've got that sort of thing going on here, you can get that sort of like 250, 350 antimatter, or sorry, psi power going on there. And that's going to be powering your Vex amplifier, and that's going to also then proc the energy accelerator's extra damage more often. So you're going to be doing a ridiculous amount of weapon damage. So that's the weapon damage build for this. It looks a little bit obtuse, but you're getting to a situation where this thing's doing an ungodly amount of damage there. You're doing, I think, like, you're probably doing something close to 200 damage to capital ships. It can get kind of gross, actually, when you're talking about like late game advent capitals doing this kind of stuff there. You don't technically need your antimatter. You just burn through all of it as quickly as you can to sort of ramp up your psionic dynamo. But you would like to have the cleansing brilliance when you're charged. So it might be a good idea for you to still power this with a bunch of acolytes there. So that's majority of the ways that I can think of at using this thing. You can definitely build this however you sort of want to. You can also do a sort of tanky version of the last one I just called on there. The energy absorptive armor does, of course, want you getting shot at, so you could go for something that's got like Psyconnect plating, got the synchronous shield there, it's got the harmony circuit, and then it's got something like, say, the Vex amplifier. Or you could have the plasma agitator, or you have the energy accelerator. The energy accelerator is a bit weird because you're getting that extra range. You'd still want this to be in close. But what you'd be doing is getting your extra damage from the attack speed ramp up from energy absorptive armor, and you're relying on the fact that you're super tanky to like draw in a bunch of animosity targets, just so that you power up energy absorptive armor really, really quickly. And then once that's fully charged, you can just deal a whole ton of damage to the enemy, no problems there. So yeah, absolutely lovely ship. I love the look of it. I love the way it functions. There's a ton of different ways to build it. I think it's really, really fun to play. It works well with itself. You can use it in other fleet compositions with other capital ships as well. But yeah, no, this is definitely one of the more interesting battleships in my opinion, in terms of what it's capable of doing and what it sort of does. So anyway, that's going to be our video for today. I hope you found this one enjoyable. And of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.